Hello everyone, welcome to the today's live webinar from Tavistock Relationships.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out to come and think about our webinar today. We've been really excited planning for it and to share some ideas and hear some of your questions really.
Yeah. So today the topic of conversation is around couple conflict and conflict between parents and disagreements and looking at why it happens and how to do it differently.
Yeah.
So we'll get onto that in a minute, but first of all we will introduce ourselves.
Absolutely. So I'm Anthony Benjamin. I'm one of the group workers here in the Parents as Partners team here at Tavistock Relationships.
And I'm Steve Mulley. I'm also a group worker on Parents as Partners here at Tavistock Relationships. And shall we speak a little bit about Parents as Partners itself, the programme?
Yeah, because we're quite passionate about the programme that we have here that's been really useful to a wide range of different couples with different challenges. Just normal challenge of being in a couple relationship really.
Yeah, and being parents, of course.
Absolutely.
So Parents as Partners is a programme that is, as Anthony said, it's for everyone in any sort of situation. And it is really to support parents and co-parents in their relationship with each other. We look at other things as well, like relationship with children and in-laws and things like that. But all of it is framed by the relationship between the parents. Because we know that if we can strengthen that, people feel more able to parent, children have better outcomes, all that kind of stuff. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think what's wonderful about this programme is it's got a very rich evidence base behind it in terms of it being, really well researched and thoughtful about what the needs are for couples, and really thinking quite holistically about what are the things that really support to nurture couple relationships that also have a knock-on effect, like you were saying, in terms of being parents, but also being able to think about the other things that come into being a couple and being a parent.
Yeah.
And I guess a key part of the model is what we call the 5 domains, actually, that kind of pull it together and enable us to think about different parts of being a couple
in a relationship.
In a relationship, absolutely.
And we'll probably touch on them quite a lot more as we're talking, won't we?
Yes.
We'll also give you details towards the end about if you wanted to get in touch and ask us about the programme, if you wanted to have a chat with us about joining it maybe. We'll kind of go into all of that towards the end as well.
Absolutely.
So should we crack on?
Yeah.
Okay. So today Anthony and I are just gonna kind of have a conversation really about couple communication and the kind of when it gets difficult and what happens. And Anthony and I will talk through our thoughts on it to begin. Well, not just our thoughts that come out of the programme from Tavistock Relationships. And then a little bit later, if you want to ask questions, use the chat facility on here, the live chat. And we've got our colleague Naomi, who's off camera. She is kind of fielding the questions for us and we'll be feeding them to us as we go. So we'll kind of get to questions in a little while.
And what I was thinking, because when we prepare for these webinars, we always have a think about what the kind of discussions that come up in our groups, because part of what we do in our group work program is we create space for couples to think about what's going on between them, but something that's shared with all the couples in the group. And couple conflict is quite a big one that comes up, which is why I felt really important to give some time and space to that. And it's kind of an everyday part of being part of a couple, is that those differences and how that's negotiated. And so it feels quite important to be able to create some space and just have some thinking about how to manage conflict.
And I think in that is what people often talk about in our groups is that it can be really helpful to know that conflict is a normal part of being in a relationship, because we are all different people. So we will always disagree at some point on something. And when you sit down with other couples and other co-parents and find out that other people have conflict too and disagreements and don't know what to do about it sometimes, that can be a relief. Just to know that, because sometimes you can feel very alone with it. People often talk about feeling very isolated in their conflict. We all get kind of caught in patterns and familiar kind of back and forths and familiar cycles that we go through, which doesn't feel very nice, but it can feel very difficult to know what to do with that.
Absolutely.
And so to talk about it with other people can be a very helpful way of just kind of breaking those patterns, really, isn't it? And kind of bringing yourselves out of it and having a think about it in a different way.
Absolutely. And one of the things that comes out, I mean, I don't know about those of you who are listening or will listen later on, is that often when there is a conflict, it's often something that you feel quite passionate about, and often you feel that you're right.
Yes.
And one of the things that we often try to tease out is that rather than making it about who's right and who's wrong, but how you can kind of fight in a fair way, rather than going into this kind of very black and white thinking, which is really hard. I know I find it very challenging. We often talk about how challenging it is when you're really passionate about your position.
And absolutely. And when we get, because when we're parents, when we're in a relationship, emotions are often quite heightened as well, aren't they? In these situations. And when your emotions are up, that's when your thinking stops.
Absolutely.
And like Anthea said, we all kind of retreat into our corner and feel like we have to fight our corner, and that we're right. And so it's about kind of stepping back from that a little bit, and we'll have a think about that and how you do that without feeling like you've been trampled over or the other person's been trampled over. And that it's not about winning and losing, like you said. It's about kind of meeting together.
Absolutely.
So I mean, some of you may have done the quiz, the online quiz from Tavistock Relationships about parenting, and one of the questions on that was kind of what do you argue about most commonly, and the options were the top 10 areas of conflict that parents specifically report, parents and co-parents. The top 10 areas of conflict, and this is from all sorts of studies from all over the place. This isn't just us looking at this. This is a kind of a collection of lots of people finding really similar results. Just on the little quiz, the online one that some of you may have taken part of, the top one, the top area of conflict was sharing household responsibilities. It's just the kind of day-to-day who does what. Did you put the bins out? That's all. Who's going to put the bins out? That real kind of, I guess it's the kind of daily grind, isn't it?
Absolute daily grind. But also something about, I mean, something that's comes from our groups quite a lot, is about different ideas about how things should be done.
Yes.
And how that in itself can raise a huge amount of feelings that can be really hard to resolve, because we all have our own ideas about how things are done, depending on the families we've grown up in, and just our attitude to chores as well.
And so it might, one question might be, who's going to put the toys away? But another question might be, do we need to put the toys away? If I'm quite happy for the toys to be strewn all over the place, because I don't mind that, but Anthea is wanting the toys put away because she wants a tidy lounge, that's a slightly different, that's kind of a step before who's going to do it, isn't it? It's kind of coming to terms with that sort of thing.
And I think, Steve, when we see that quite a bit in groups, it does come down to a lot of personal preference. Because, as you're saying, for one person, it's not a big deal for the toys to be out, but for someone else, that would be very disturbing. It would be really hard to chill out after a long day with the kids, knowing that the stuff is out there, and how that's negotiated as a couple is really can be quite fragile and delicate. And other times, depending on how well you are to kind of communicate around those differences, can make actually a day that's been okay suddenly turn into a really difficult day where the communication completely breaks down.
And Anthea's just said communication, because really we're going to be bashing on about communication, really, because that's the key to this, isn't it? Because again, like we were saying earlier, there's no particular right and wrong whether the toys should be away or not, but it's how you decide what to do and how you talk about that. And so if I desperately want the toys to be put away, it might be quite helpful for me to be able to say why and how it makes me feel in a way that doesn't come across as attacking to Anthea, and and Anthea receives that in a way that is informative and helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's we're going to be thinking about opening up these communication channels, because often, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, we all know from real life, but also the couples that we work with, there's that sense of, we were arguing about the dishes, but it wasn't really about the dishes.
Absolutely.
There's always, when we're in relationships, we have a shared history.
Absolutely.
And that shared history is often within everything. And an argument about the dishes can be terribly hurtful when it's just about the dishes. And that's often because arguments are loaded emotionally and kind of mentally behind it all. So yeah, that sense of, we had this huge argument about putting the bins out, but of course it's not about putting the bins out. And just kind of thinking, well, what is it about?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And finding the words for what it is that's really underneath that. Yeah. Because it can mean so many different things, to not feeling listened to not feeling that your feelings are respected, to just feeling that actually something just doesn't get understood, that suddenly the communication gets really distorted. It comes out in these kind of small things, rather than being able to talk about the heart of the issue.
Absolutely.
Where maybe you can actually make some movement if you can really talk honestly. But I suppose part of the challenge that comes up in the group with couples is about being able to be vulnerable and admitting that actually you maybe feel hurt or upset about something, or even angry, because I mean, whatever the feeling, it's important for that to be expressed and to be shared between you as a couple. But sometimes that can feel really risky.
And it can feel terribly frightening to be vulnerable sometimes, can't
Absolutely.
it? Even with somebody that you know and trust and love. So I mean, just the other things on the list of common things that people argue about. So there's the sharing of household tasks. How we talk to each other is a big one. How to raise and discipline the children. Hi, somebody's just joined us.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. We're just talking about kind of the top 10 things that people have arguments about and conflict about. So there's household chores, how we talk to each other, how to raise and discipline the children, money and finances, sex, amount of time we spend together, the in-laws and kind of extended families, employment and jobs, desire to change, so kind of the want to change, and the quality of time spent together.
Absolutely.
So we've mentioned briefly a little bit about that often this is to do with our differences. So often, we've all had different backgrounds, different upbringings, different experiences in life, and how we approach conflict and how we want the way of things to be depends on all sorts of things. And that can be big things, it can be small things. And it's those differences that are really the key, aren't they?
Absolutely. And one of the things that couples often talk about in our groups is how when children are suddenly part of the couple relationship, that there's less time, there's particularly less time as a couple if you haven't really been able to carve out that time on a regular basis to really reconnect and to nurture that relationship. So the time to kind of be able to negotiate the differences is very limited, and they often could be quite snap decisions that can lead to some miscommunication and feeling not valued or listened to. So there's something about making space for each other and finding a way to be able to check in, because there is an assumption if you've been a couple, particularly if you've been a couple for a long time, that you really know what's in each other's minds. That's something that's comes up quite a bit in our groups. And actually, you're still individuals and you're still evolving and having new ideas and new experiences all the time. So how can you kind of check in with each other so you actually find out what you're both thinking, rather than making those assumptions that so often happen in a couple relationship.
So quickly.
So quickly. It's a big part of it.
So it's something about staying open and curious to the other person, really, isn't it? And just having those open conversations, even if you think you know what they're thinking.
Absolutely.
Because we would really say that, we'd really encourage you to say that differences are good. Children need to see difference in their parents, and difference is a resource. The world out there is different. Children will be coming across all sorts of different opinions and thoughts. So to see parents being different is really important for children, and to have different ideas, and that but also those different ideas and experiences can bring a wealth of knowledge, of experience, all sorts of things, to opportunities to a family, to a couple. So the difference can be a real strength, where it can also be a real difficulty, if that makes sense. So it's kind of both, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's about opening up those areas of difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And seeing them as a positive rather than a negative. Yeah.
Well, you're going to, I don't know if you're going to.
We've got a question.
We've got a question. Let's check that out.
So someone's asked, what practical suggestions do you have to help me stop myself from getting into conflict when I see red it's too late?
It's a very good question.
Really good question.
And it's quite a popular one in our groups,
really
actually,
is,
with couples. Quite a bit comes up.
Because actually, I mean, I think you're right. Often, by the time you get to the point where you see red, it does feel a bit too late sometimes, you know, and that's because really you're spot on in terms of the way you think about it, because there's something you're kind of thinking, well, maybe there's something I can do before I get to the point of seeing red, and before I stop being able to think and be a rational human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's very hard about when you get to that red point, which you seem to be really stating there, it's hard to stop, because often the capacity to really think things through has gone. And normally people are so full of feelings, whatever the feelings, whether it's anger or hurt, and often confusion, because it's very hard. The communication is often broken down. It's really hard to hear what the other person is saying. To be able to have a constructive communication at that point is very, very limited.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, one of the things that we talk about in our groups quite a bit is actually noticing when you've hit the kind of red zone, as you're suggesting here, and actually at that point, it's almost like you need to take yourself away.
Yeah.
It's like a cooling off period is what's needed at that point, until you're in a space where you can actually really think about what's been said and reflect on your own responses, and maybe to find another way of communicating what your needs are in that moment. Because for most people in that red zone, it's kind of all bets are off in some ways, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I think it's often when people lose the thread of what they're really trying to say.
Yeah.
Would you agree, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's then that moment is that kind of, we were shouting at each other about the laundry, but we knew it wasn't about the laundry. You know, because there's those underlying things. So I guess practically what we're saying is, you know, it's kind of much bigger than that moment, isn't it? It's like you said earlier, it's about making sure that you put time aside to be with each other, even if you're separated. You know, we work with a lot of separated co-parents, but you've still got the shared children, and you still need to carve out time to talk to each other, which can be hard. So, but it's that kind of the prep work really to try and avoid getting to that red zone.
Absolutely.
If you hit it, walking away, getting some space, cooling off, but making sure you come back to it.
Absolutely.
Children, what we often hear is that people are worried that they don't want to show their children any conflict at all. Children need to see difference and conflict, and children need to see people disagreeing with each other. What they need to see more than that, though, is the resolution to that. So it's the coming back to it. So if you've had a cooling off period, it's coming back round, letting the kids see that you've kind of got back together, talked about it, cooled off, and that you've resolved the conflict.
Absolutely.
And that's actually related to the next question that's coming.
So what's the next question, Steve?
My partner and I have been arguing a lot since our child reached the terrible twos. A very common
scenario.
I don't like arguing in front of our child, but my husband says our child is too young to understand, so it's fine. Is he right? That's a really common.
It's very common, isn't it?
Scenario, like you say, situation to be in. You know, children are stressful, but you know, they bring joy and laughter and all that kind of stuff, but they bring stress, especially when they're hitting terrible twos or they're going through all these different phases. We actually know from research that children of any age, right from birth, respond to high levels of conflict between their parents and in those around them. Like I say, children need to see a little bit of conflict, but if there are high levels of unresolved conflict, and that might be the kind of high temperature stuff, the screaming and shouting, it might be the not talking to each other, Cold War sort of, but children, those are both equally as impactful on children and can have really negative
impact on them,
but right from birth. So you're absolutely right. It does it's right from the start.
And I think, I think most people have a sense of this, that children are like sponges. They're really taking in everything from their environment. And so if a conflict is happening every so often, but it's managed and resolved, they can tolerate that, they can manage that, because they can actually see that their parents are managing it, and then internalising something about how do I deal with conflict. And also, it's okay to have conflict. We'll survive that. That was an important communication for children to have. But if they're having conflict that's frequent, that's quite intense, whether that is the kind of Cold War intensity or the kind of high shouting and disputes that can happen between couples, that bit is very hard for children to kind of process and make sense of, and very overwhelming for the child who hasn't kind of developed the kind of internal strength to be able to make sense of that, to process it. And this is a challenge for young children, because I think for a long time there's been an idea if they're younger, they don't really understand it, so it's okay. But actually in some ways it's worse, because they don't understand what's going on, but they feel it. And that's far more difficult to make sense of.
And I think because another important thing is that we all, like we've said, when we're children, that's when we learn how to deal with conflict. So that means when we're adults, we approach conflict differently.
Absolutely.
And some people might avoid it absolutely, like don't want to do anything to rock the boat ever, which isn't a particularly helpful way of doing it. And then other people will go in guns blazing every time on the attack, and equally that's quite unhelpful as well.
Absolutely.
So it's something about finding that middle ground. So you're not avoiding conflict entirely, but you're not in these kind of explosive states all the time.
But I was interested in the phrasing of that question, because it kind of says, is he right? And I suppose on one level, he's right in the sense that it's very clear part of the communication is that we really need to try and sort something out, and the difficulty to try and sort something out. But in terms of doing that and the impact on your child, that is something to be more mindful of. So I guess I would be wondering about how can you create space so that you can have those more difficult conversations, so that you can find some way to resolve, make sense of, understand each other, because those conversations do need to take place. But it's about when and how you have those conversations. And I think the Parents as Partners program it provides that kind of safe arena for some of those very difficult conversations to take place, with the help of co-facilitators to help you to understand each other a bit more, and to give you some ideas about how you take that conversation forward, so that you can then manage it, have tools for yourself in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And something, it's never too late to change. Don't, if your kids have been exposed to high levels of conflict, you can't change that, but it's never too late to change for kids. Kids will always respond to things improving and getting better. We've got one last question, which we'll have to do very quickly because we're almost out of time. Some of us, my ex-wife and I, had a very acrimonious split. We share custody of the kids, but still have huge conflict. Again, a very common scenario of co-parent couples that we work with. I sometimes can't help bad-mouthing her in front of the kids. She's awful. But lately I have been wondering how that is for them. And I think this is such an important question.
A really thoughtful question,
really
actually.
Thoughtful.
It feels like you're really trying to think about what it's like for the children, and that's often something that we advocate in our programmes, to really be understanding what it's like for the children to be around and witnessing in these conflicts.
So, I mean, just, practically and advice-wise, I think you're onto something here. It sounds like you've kind of been thinking a bit about it yourself, but you're right. It is tricky for the children when one parent badmouths the other in front of them. It's hard for children to kind of work out how to internalise that, and how to think about that, and how to understand that. So, like it looks like you're kind of
grappling with
that. I think that's great.
But one of the things we were talking about earlier, wasn't it, is that one of the difficulties around these kind of particular dilemmas is that children often, when they hear anything bad said about either one of their parents, they take it very personal, because they're part of them, and it's very confusing and creates a kind of conflict about what that means, what it means about their relationship with that parent. And so there's something about any difficult comments made about the other parent is going to create conflict for that child, and you want to avoid that as much as possible, because they're already making a massive transition about how to understand that their parents are no longer together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as much as possible, certainly one of the things that we do in our co-parenting, separated co-parents groups, is to really help them to hold the children as central in their thinking, so that they don't have additional worries in terms of the conflict that's going on between their parents. And it's tricky, it's really hard.
Really tricky. I don't know whether any of you out there ever watch Emmerdale. But last night, in fact,
absolutely.
There was an example of one of the characters was doing exactly that. Was kind of talking about. Was she talking about the other parents?
She's talking about men, because Charity's had I think the character's Charity, and she's had a very difficult time with men historically, and she has a son, and made a throwaway comment about the world would be better without men. And you could see the impact on her son hearing that, because of course the communication then becomes, is that what you think about me?
Yeah. He's thinking, well, I'm going to be a man one day, so does my mum think the world's going to be a better place without me? Yeah. So you can see how children can often just hear things and take something away that perhaps we didn't mean them to. And I think that's really important, is that the parents and the couples that we work with so often say, we talk about intentions. Nobody's intention is ever to do anything bad to the children, harm the children. But children can often get the wrong intention or get the wrong idea about something. So it can be tricky, but it's hard. But we need to kind of keep them in mind in the midst of all these differences and conflicts.
But that's why I think that first question is really helpful, because it's almost like a lot of those things are said when couples are in the red zone, where they're so overwhelmed with feelings that they're not able to think about the children or the impact on the other person, and they just say things from that hurt place. And actually, that's why in those moments, it's often the best thing to do is to actually take a time out and come back at a time when you can think together and be more mindful about the impact you have on each other, and to really hear what the other person has to say, because ultimately what we would say about conflict is that the difference is important, and the work is around tolerating those differences and finding that compromise.
And often people talk about trust being broken within a relationship, and it's about rebuilding that trust. So in Parents as Partners, we do a lot of thinking about rebuilding that trust and regaining it, and kind of developing it much more. You know, we really think that conflict is an opportunity. It's not something that should be shied away from or ignored or pretending that it's not happening. Conflict is an opportunity for parents to think really creatively and come up with new ideas, and to show their children how to kind of deal with a world that's full of conflict and difference. And so within the groups, we really think about how are we saying things, what words are we using, what tone of voice are we using. We think about all the different facets of communication: body language, tone of voice, eye contact, and also the actual words we're using. How do we say something without it sounding attacking? How do we hear something without feeling attacked?
And one of the things we talk a lot about is how you're able to do the repair. We've been talking about that. You know, conflict is part of life, and there are times when you're going to get it wrong with each other. But the important piece is how you're able to come back together and think about that, and to do the repair around the hurts or the things that were said in the heat of the moment when you just couldn't hold it. And that's part of being human. But that repair is really important, and often, I mean, I think a number of couples, when they have been able to apply this, that repair can often bring them much closer and can be the start of really rebuilding that couple relationship. So it's certainly something we spend quite a bit of time in supporting couples to really find a new way of coming back and repairing the hurts. That's for some have been there for a very long time.
So we're going to have to wrap up in a moment. If you would have got an email from me over the last couple of days. If you'd like to get in touch, please do. You could send an email, or there's phone numbers at the bottom of that, all sorts of things. You're very welcome to get in touch.
We're recruiting now for
We're
groups.
recruiting now for groups,
So
across London.
Absolutely. So if there's anything here that really kind of rings true for you, or you think actually we could do some of that, please make contact. You know, we tend to have conversations with people to just think about whether now's the right time. But we're, as you can see, we're really approachable, really keen to support couples and really enable them to nurture their relationships. So do get in touch.
Yeah. So in the meantime, we'd encourage you to take some time out, spend some time together somehow, carve out some time in your week.
Absolutely.
Think about how you're saying things.
And be compassionate with yourself as well.
With yourself and each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thanks for joining us. We'll let you know about the next one.
Yeah, we'll do.
We'll send out some details about that. Okay. But in the meantime, get in touch if you've got any questions.
Okay. Thanks for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us.
Yeah. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.